once again on the Robert Sungenis live program, this time for December the 21st in the year 2022. So glad you could be with us tonight. As you know, or as you may know, I've been away for, I think, 5 weeks. Was not able to do this program for health reasons, and if I can be of any service to the country, COVID is real because I had it. And I think I still do a little bit. It's waning as the days go by, and hopefully by the end of this year, I will be through it with all the battle scars that come with it. For any of you out there that have had it, you know that you have it because you taste and smell very differently than you did when you were normal. And that's been the case with me. I don't know exactly how to describe it, but there's this certain smell that comes out of nowhere, and you're wondering if you're smelling something in the house or in your office or wherever you are. And doesn't smell bad. It just smells unique. Not perfume, not cologne, not a rose, that's for sure. But I usually use the word metallic. It smells like something metallic that's gotten into your nasal passages. At any rate, you can tell you have the COVID because that's one of the symptoms of it. Anyway, I survived, and here I am to tell you about it. So, the other thing, I just get very tired, and that's why I wasn't able to do the programs. By the time 8 o'clock around, I was ready for bed. So what I'm going to do for next year, if it's okay with my audience, is I'd like to change the time from 8 p.m. And we go to 10 p.m. To probably, I'm toying with this time. I'm not positive about it, but I'd like to change it to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to 5 p.m. on Wednesdays. And that's when I have a little bit more energy, because if I find that if at my present age and stamina, if I work the whole day and then I try to do the program, I'm about ready to fall asleep. And we're starting our 5th year on this program, believe it or not. So 4 years have gone by, and when you're at my age, 4 years is like 40 years. And you begin to see the differences in how your body reacts and what it can do and what it cannot do. At any rate, so I'm going to toy with that idea. Probably in January, I will be changing it just to experiment with it from 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if you're on the Pacific Coast, that of course means it would be at lunchtime for you, 12 to 2. And then Mountain Time would be 1 to 3, and Central Time would be 2 to 4, rather. So that's what I will be doing. And let me see if there's anything else. 5 weeks, you would think there's always a lot going on, of course, and it's hard to keep up with it all. So we'll see what the questions are tonight. And at any rate, I have an advertiser that I need to advertise for. So I'm going to do that once again. FIDEI is the name of the company, and you can reach them at FIDEI. That's at FIDEI.email. And the guy that runs the show there is Michael Stefano. And FIDEI is a technology company run by Catholics that offers alternatives to big tech without the moral compromise. Sign up for your own secure email address ending in @fidei.email, or use your own domain. Our email has an easy-to-use web interface and works with the vast majority of email apps, including the ones built into your phone and computer. We also offer synchronized calendars, file sharing like Google Drive and Dropbox, real-time collaborative documents, secured encrypted chat, and private community forums for parishes and organizations. We also have a family plan to accommodate large families. So there you have it. Check them out. Let me see if I got everything here. The way you would go to them is www.fidei, F-I-D-E-I, .email, and no .com, okay? So www.fidei.email. That's how you would reach them, okay? So take advantage of this Catholic-based tech company that gives you everything everybody else does, except without the moral compromise. Isn't that nice to hear? So, okay, there were some questions that came in by email, as you can imagine, and there were a lot of them, so I had to go through them judiciously to pick out the ones that who knows what criteria I used to pick them out. You know, I don't know. I can't tell you. So one comes from Omar, who says, why does it seem that Matthew contradicts Luke in the narrative of the angel? Oh, before I get to the questions. As you can see, the DVD, the world, how the world was made in 6 days, day one. There's the back of the DVD. So the story on this baby is this DVD will be coming out in January 2023. It's an hour and a half long on day one of creation. Written by yours truly, produced by Bruce and directed by Keith Jones. Sponsored by the Colby Center for the Study of Creation. And we have some fantastic animations, charts, graphs, pictures, images, photos, and we have great narration, two of the best gentlemen I have ever had the pleasure of working with on this DVD. Let me see. Jared Burks and Zach Jones. They're going to become famous with this DVD. And they are absolutely fantastic. So on this DVD, we have also an intro to this DVD. And the intro is, I think, about 18 minutes long. And we're going to use that as our trailer. And that trailer will be coming out on the day after Christmas, December 26th. And I think it's going to be on Sensum Fideum and other outlets. But you'll be able to see a bird's eye view of what the movie's about, how he put it together in that trailer, 16 minutes long. And that trailer is excellent. I've seen it. I've watched it probably about a dozen times. And I'm just so impressed with Keith's work on that. And this is unlike any other DVD series you will ever watch in your lifetime or that has been available to mankind. And I don't say that lightly. We have taken a literal approach to the study of Genesis chapter 1 and all the other related passages, unlike any other literal interpretation you've ever come across, including St. Augustine. Okay. Our work is much better than St. Augustine's. So he kind of gave up on a literal interpretation after a while. But we take all the fathers, all the medievals, all the church statements, and the best of modern science is probably the feature of this DVD series. You're not going to believe what modern science has to say that supports a literal interpretation of creation. And it's just amazing. So we've taken the best of the Catholic Fathers, Medievals, Magisterium, the best of modern science, and the best of Hebrew exegesis from a grammatical standpoint that has ever been applied to the book of Genesis. I know because I've been at this for 45 years. I know what's out there and I know what they say. Ours is by far, and I'm not patting ourselves on the back here. I'm just saying that these are facts. Okay. So it is the best. And like I said, the first DVD will be available in January. We have the intro available on December 26th, free of charge. You can see that in 18-minute intro. And if that doesn't whet your appetite to go and get this DVD series, nothing will. So just letting you know, it's come. I've been waiting for this for a long time, and finally here. So take advantage of it. Your kids will enjoy it because it's written on a level where we try to make it understandable to everyone, scholar and layman alike. That's quite a task to do that. But there's stuff that's going to go over your head, I'm sure. But there's stuff that you're going to understand, and you're going to be able to see from just a sort of a general point of view. Wow, that's why God did this. That's why God did that. That's why he wrote it like this. That's why he had two lights, and one on the first day, and then the stars and the sun on the fourth day. Oh, now I see it all put together, and it's just so beautiful. It's just unbelievably beautiful, the way Genesis is put together. Once you trust God that he knows what he's doing and he tells the truth, never lies, and once you submit to that and then start reading the Bible from Genesis 1, it just is amazing how it all comes together. Once you are faithful to, hey, look, this is God talking. And obviously he knows what he's doing. Okay. So that's where we start with this. We believe what God is and what he says, and we take it to heart and go from there. And then it becomes quite easy once you do that. Okay. Like a lot of people get all hung up. Well, how can there be a light on the first day and then there's another set of lights on the fourth day? That sounds contradictory. Yeah, and there's many Catholic scholars that say that. And then they refuse to interpret Genesis literally because they think there's a contradiction, you see. So if you don't come from that milieu, and you look at Genesis and you say, look, there's a good reason why God made this light on the first day and then made the other lights on the fourth day. There's got to be a reason. Okay? Because obviously God knows that by the time Adam's created, he wasn't there when the great light was made on the first day. He's never going to see that. So why did he write it like that? If no man's ever going to see that great light on the first day, and they're only going to see the sun and the stars on the fourth day, why even put it in there? Well, there's a good reason why. Very good reason. Without that light, we wouldn't have a creation, as a matter of fact. That's how tightly knit that narrative is. Okay, every single thing is needed to make it progress to the other 6 days. And we show all that. And each DVD, this first one here, day one, that's an hour and a half long. Okay, so you can imagine the detail we're going to, in day one, what's only 3 verses? And we spent an hour and a half on those. Okay, so we get into every stinking little detail in that story to let you know why God put it together the way he did. Day 2, I think, is 2 hours. Day 3, I think, is an hour and a half. Day 4 is probably going to be 4 to 5 hours long. That's where we give you the most science, Not that the others don't have science, but they're all loaded up with modern science, okay, taken from a biblical standpoint. Day 4 is the longest, and then day 5 is probably another hour and a half, and day 6 probably an hour, day 7 probably an hour. So we've got some, almost 10 hours of meticulous analysis of the first the 7 days of Genesis, including the day of rest at the end. All right, so enough of that. Let me get back to this question here. It says, why does it seem that Matthew contradicts Luke in the narrative of the angel telling Joseph in a dream to head for Egypt right after Jesus' birth when the Magi leave? But Luke seems to say they stayed in Israel after the Magi came and presented Jesus in the temple as normal, and then speaking with the temple elders. Okay, well, Luke does not cover a lot of the birth narrative. Okay, he's special sections of the birth narrative, and he has the shepherds in there, but then he goes right to when Jesus was 12 years old and got lost from his mom and dad in the temple, and so he leaves a lot out. So you really Matthew basically has the chronology. Luke just sort of fills in some of the details. So you really can't say that Luke contradicts Matthew because Luke doesn't cover a lot of this stuff. Okay, I mean, I don't think Luke even mentions the Magi. So it would be hard to say, well, he's contradicting Matthew about the Magi. Matthew's the only one that mentions the Magi. So yeah, I think you're reading into the passage. Okay, look at Luke from the fact that he doesn't cover a lot of that a birth narrative except for the shepherds. Okay, so we got that done, and then all right, here's 3 questions. Let me put the old glasses on. All right, question 1. Do you think there is a danger in the way many view and accuse Pope Francis in his statements and actions? I think there can be 2 extremes, hypercriticism and hyperdefense. That said, is it possible that Pope Francis is easily taken out of context and prejudged, perhaps according to his personality? While we should be wary, of the danger of papolatry and ultramontanism, or as current lingo goes, pope-splaining. That's cute, pope-splaining. Is it nonetheless fitting and just that we should, given his high office, afford him more benefit of the doubt? There are often charges of heresy, which is dangerous ground, even if it's couched by using the disclaimer of opinion, or any given charge being material as opposed to formal heresy. Given that the first see is judged by no one, which we were taught by various popes and councils, I think that this is a line that is often crossed. What are your thoughts? Well, yeah, I see everything you're saying here, and I've been trying to say the same thing myself. And then Francis will come out with some weird thing just the next day that you've recognized, the give and go and the balance that has to be struck with dealing with the Pope. Like, what was it? Was it this week that he hired on the committee? I even forget the name of the committee. A pro-abortionist. It's come on, Francis. Brother, I want to respect and love you like the Pope. I wish you could be, but then you turn around, and the moment we're trying to defend you from all the, as you say, hypercritics out there, you go and do something like this, and you slap us in the face. Okay, so look, with this Pope, there's just too much extreme on one side and the other, and it's hard to try to get into the middle of all that and give him the benefit of the doubt, although I'm not going to give up trying to give him the benefit of the doubt. There are sometimes Francis comes up with words of wisdom, like I'm saying, woo, where did he get that from? And so it's not that he can't do it. It's just, I think one thing with Francis is that when he got into the papacy in 2013, remember his words were, yeah, let's make a mess. And I could see one reason why he would say that. It's just like Jesus coming, saying, yeah, let's make a mess. Because these Pharisees, Sadducees, the Sanhedrin, they've made a mess of things. So we're going to make a mess of their things. We're going to start from ground zero and work our way back up. Because sometimes you just have to do that. Things get so crusty and rickety, and it's like a house of cards, and you've got to blow it down and start all over again, basically. Now, of course, Catholics don't start all over again from total ground zero, because we still have the dogma, the fathers, the scripture, we have all that. But in this complicated life that we live in the modern age, where we have more ways to sin than they ever had in the previous ages, we got surrogate motherhood and all that kind of, well, that's another way to sin, that we didn't have before. And we have the, contraception, artificial. They didn't have that before. And now we can kill babies in the womb. They didn't have that before. And so we have all kinds of ways we can sin today that makes life very complicated. And we build these structures to try to handle it all. And sometimes they're rickety because we don't have a clear voice from the magisterium. We have opinions, and we have messages given to us on airplane rides and things like that. And we're wondering, okay, so who is going to tell us the truth to deal with all these multifaceted, multi-complicated issues that we have to in modern life? We don't want any more airplane rides and somebody speaking off the cuff, because that's not going to help us. That's how, we started this whole homo thing, well, who am I to judge? That's how he started off his pontificate. Well, you're the Pope, okay? You're the only one we can go to. If you want the love and respect that you want to have for your pontificate, well, act like it. Give us the definitive statement. Don't say things like, who am I to judge? Because you're the one person we look to be the judge. And if you're going to curtsy and cower to the homosexual side of life and like it's no big deal, you can't expect people to then say, well, Pope Francis hasn't committed any heresy or whatever, because now we're going to be scrutinizing you a lot more than we would have otherwise if you didn't say statements like that off the cuff on airplanes. Okay? You got to be very careful as the Pope when you are the head honcho. You are the guy that people look to. You have to be very careful what you say and how you say it. And most of the problems Francis has had has been when he's made statements off the cuff. And, just the thought that he had that day without any precognition of it or how it's going to affect this or that or the other thing. And you can't do that as Pope. And this is the problem that modern popes have ever since what? Pius XII, okay, where now every word you say is scrutinized. Before, the popes used to live in virtual obscurity because there was no communication. There wasn't radio and TV and the internet and all that, okay? They lived private lives, basically. And the only time you heard from them was when they made some formal declaration. They weren't traveling the world, okay? So, but today it's different. The popes are traveling the world. Everything they say is recorded and cataloged. And so we have to be, or they have to be, extra special careful when they are dealing with the public now because of the scrutiny that's going to come, whether they like it or not. This is just the modern age. And hey, look, we're all subject to the same thing, aren't we? You can look up your name on the internet. and you're going to get 10,000 opinions of who you are, what you've said, how you deal with things, blah, blah, blah. That never used to be the case before. So now everybody's got to be super careful, okay? Because look, there's a lot of people out there that hate Catholics, and they are intent on distorting what you say and who you are, especially the abortionists and the homosexual community. And now we have the transgender community. We have all kinds of communities out there. And their one big enemy is the Catholic Church. Okay. So, yeah, it's a lot different for everybody today, and especially if you're the Pope. So he's got to be more careful. And selecting a pro abortionist for this committee that he just lined up is just not the way you're going to get people on your side. Okay. Now, I would grant, people like, there's a lot of apologists out there, and they've always been this way, that they just will not concede that any pope has said anything wrong. They are true apologists, because that's what an apologist is. If you have a political apologist, what does he do? Well, if the president says something, like, who's the press secretary, the black woman, I forget her name. If Joe Biden says something that's a little off kilter or rubs some people the wrong way, well, it's her job as the presidential apologist, because that's what she is, to smooth it over and say, well, he didn't really mean that. He meant this in light of this, so she goes on and on and tries to smooth over some, controversial statement that Joe Biden did or hasn't done, like the border, for example. And, so this is the job of an apologist. And you're going to get, true blue apologists that, cannot be convinced that the Pope has said anything wrong and everything he's done is orthodox. And you're going to get people on the total other side, because you know what? That's the nature of life. We've got liberals, we've got conservatives, and we've got everything in between. And people are going to see things differently. So it's not a matter of, I don't think, siding with the apologists that defend Francis to the hilt, because look, you and I know that he has said things and done things that can't be defended. And then he said other things that, can be defended. And I've defended him on the occasions where he's obviously done a good thing. And I've been after him, just like the other people, when he's, off base. Okay. And look, he knows all this that's going on. And that's one thing I think that keeps him in line, is he knows that if he goes off the track too much, there's going to be a whole group of Catholics out there that are going to get on his tail. And look, he's human just like everybody else is human. And he needs this. Okay. As a matter of fact, I don't know of any pope who has been immune to this, especially in the last half of the 20th century going into the 21st. Like I said, the world's too complicated now, and everybody knows what you say and what you do to the T. There's just no escape from it. And so you're bound to get that to happen. So this is the nature of the game, and you and I discussing it's not going to change it at all. There's going to be those out there that defend him and those out there that are very critical. And you can't blame either group. They're all trying to do their best to do their job, so to speak. And that's life. Okay. We take it as it comes and deal with it the best we can. All right. But I agree with you that you don't want to go to either extreme. You don't go to the extreme where just because he's the Pope and you engage in papolatry or ultramontanism, now you have to defend everything the Pope says. No, you don't have to do that. Okay. And then on the other side, we're just hypercritical. Every word that comes out of Pope Francis's mouth is criticized, and you can't go that direction either. You have to be in balance between those two. And that's the safest place I would recommend that we stay. try to stay between the hypercritical and the hyper defensive people. There's, as I say with anything, the truth is always somewhere in the middle. That's not true in every case, but usually when you have opinions flying everywhere, the truth is in the middle somewhere. Okay. It's just like the Republicans and the Democrats, today, everything's all political. And, we cry about the last election because we didn't get the red wave that we thought we were going to get. But, in another light, you look at that and you say, well, when the Republicans are in power, they tend to wield the power a little too strongly. And we saw with the Bush administration, they just got a little too powerful. And, Dick Cheney and all his crew, wanting to take over the world. My gosh, these guys had delusions of grandeur that I've never quite seen before. And so they can be just as dangerous as some of the liberals can with the liberal issues of society, like abortion and all that we decry as conservatives. But there's a balance of power. So as much as we might be sad about, losing the red wave, at least we have a balance of power. And that's about all you can hope for in the so-called, democratic society, where people get into political positions by spending the most money for their constituents. I mean, come on. Showing favoritism to your constituents is the way that you get into office? Well, if that's the case, then money buys elections, basically. Okay. Is that what you're promoting? Yeah, no, we don't want that either. Okay. But that's one of the fallouts from a so-called democratic society where you don't have a monarchy. Because the monarch is just the next guy in line and he takes the throne. He's not out for, spending money for his constituents so that he will get votes that he gets in. Okay. So the whole system is kind of warped in the way that money basically controls who's in, who's out, and all this kind of stuff. And so what am I trying to say? I'm just trying to say, look, in this world, we're going to have this kind of turmoil. And we are fortunate to have a balance of power so that one group does not get very powerful. Because as soon as they think they're powerful, brother, they will lord it over you. Let's put it that way, because that's been the history of mankind. Okay? Absolute power corrupts absolutely. We have seen that over and over and over again. So the one thing we have in this society is a balance of power. Okay. And then we can take that balance elsewhere where we're dealing with the Pope or any other issue of life. You don't want to go to one extreme or the other. Okay. Now, you may not know all the answers, even taking the balance, but at least you're in a safe place. Okay. And then you can do the other stuff you want to do. All right. I'd probably talk too long on that question, but let me go on here. Second question is, do you think there is a danger in any way, in the way many view? Oh, we already did that. Question 2. This flows on from my last question. What do you make of Michael Lofton? I see you took him to task recently, and I don't think he reacted well. He seems to be fairly sound when it comes to understanding the magisterium. He's writing a dissertation on this. With this in mind, he's posted a few podcasts where it gives us an opportunity to pause and consider how we view the current pontificate. Here's one that digs a little deeper into Amoris Laetitia. Well, we've talked about Amoris Laetitia on here, and there's what needs to happen. I'm not going to talk about Michael Lofton right now, but what needs to happen is the Pope Francis himself, as I've said before, needs to come out and clarify what this document really means and who it applies to and when it's going to apply. Okay. As far as I know, the best case scenario is to take it take it on a case-by-case basis. Okay. And there are many people who are defending Amoris laetitia on that basis, where it's not a general statement for the populace, that it is to be used in special cases where someone was divorced or remarried, and then there's other complications over here and over there and over here and over there. Well, at least they're going to have room with Amoris laetitia to look at these cases and decide whether something can be done or not. But I don't see this encyclical being used on a wide scope. Now, that's what the German bishops wanted. They wanted it to be used on the widest scope possible. Why? Well, because all the German people have left the Catholic churches in Germany, and they have very few people going to Mass on Sunday. Same in France, two of the most liberal countries in the world. Well, that's because they're not preaching the gospel anymore. It's the fellowship of man, brother and sister, we're all one, blah, blah, blah. There's no talk about sin and damnation like the gospel's supposed to be preached. People want to hear that, whether you think they do or not. They want to hear that. They want to be convicted of their sins, and they want to get their lives right. That's why they come to church in the first place. Okay? So all this attempt by the German bishops to get the Catholic people who have been divorced and remarried, because the bishops have been preaching a totally relaxed gospel, a gospel that has no teeth in it. And so, of course, they're going to get divorced and remarried if you're not enforcing the Catholic laws. And now they're all crying the blues because these people have left the church. And the only way to get them back is to try to fix their marriages, so to speak. And why do they want them back? Well, because they give Sunday donations. That's why. And that's where the money for the church comes from the donations of the people. But if the people aren't there giving, we got a problem, Houston. And the way to get them back, well, let's change the doctrine. And so you got Amoris laetitia coming out, seeming to tend in that direction, and yet we can't be sure because it doesn't explicitly say so. And even what it says implicitly has to be taken on a case-by-case basis. So the German bishops aren't going to get what they wanted. Okay, they may have a much more liberal pope in there than they would have had. I'm sorry, they have a much more liberal pope in there than any conservative that would have gotten in there, of course. But they suffer the same brunt of what Pope Francis does as we do, because they never know what Francis is going to do. He's like a jury. You go in and they say, you never know what the jury's going to decide. It's like Francis. You never know what Francis is going to decide, or he's going to come down one day to the next. That may be nerve-wracking for some people, but it keeps everybody on their toes, so to speak. And so the liberals aren't winning the war in that sense. All right, enough of that. Third question is, what do you make of modern translations of Scripture wherein the requirement for fasting has been removed? Oh, yeah, this is a biggie. I've heard it suggested that it's due to Vatican II, but I think this is a bit simplistic. The counter-argument suggests it's due to more scrutiny of Greek manuscripts. Well, yes and no. It is true that, what is it, Matthew, I'm trying to think of the verse. I think it's Matthew 17:21. And then Mark 10, I forget the exact passage. At any rate, your older manuscripts, let's say, well, let's first say this, that it is a manuscript issue, because there are some manuscripts, Greek manuscripts, that have prayer and fasting, and there are others that just have prayer. Okay. Now, two of the more famous Greek manuscripts, both housed at the Vatican, by the way. One is Codex Sinaiticus, a 4th or 5th century Greek uncial. Uncial means they had big letters. So that's rather old, okay? That's around the time of Jerome. But Jerome didn't have that manuscript when he was doing the Vulgate. And then the other one is named after the Vatican, Codex Vaticanus. That is also from the same period of time, 4th, 5th century. Now, these are two of the most famous Greek manuscripts because they contain a lot of the Greek New Testament and a lot of the Hebrew Old Testament. And they're rather early, so they get the priority when a textual critic is looking at Greek manuscripts. Usually the oldest is the more reliable. Not all the time, okay? And then there's another one called Codex Alexandrinus. That comes from the 5th century. And these were all found in the 1800s. We didn't have these before, okay? And it just so happens that Sinaiticus and Vaticanus don't have the word fasting after the word prayer, okay? Now, you just can't, as a textual critic, you just can't shrug this off and say, oh, well, you know, most of the Greek manuscripts have it, so that means we retain it. That could be the case. We just don't know, okay? Now, on the side of, oh, and there's a father, Clement of Rome, that doesn't have the word fasting in his citation of Matthew 17:21. So, you know, you see that and you begin to wonder. So now the other side has a corrected version of Codex Sinaiticus with the word fasting in there. Okay, so somebody figured out before we expose Codex Sinaiticus to the public, we're going to change this word. We're going to add the word fasting in there, okay, because it's not in the original Codex Sinaiticus. Yeah, you get Greek manuscripts like that, okay? Somebody thinks he knows better and said, well, I'm going to fix this for everybody. You know, he's not fixing anything, basically. He's contaminating it. So, and then you have with the word fasting, we have a whole set of Greek manuscripts called papyri. Papyri were written on papyrus. I hope I'm saying that right. Papyrus paper, not vellum. Vellum was leather, and that's what Sinaiticus and Vaticanus were written on. And that's why they lasted so long. Papyrus is a little bit more flimsy, but we do have papyri, and they are from like the 2nd century. Most of them are. And so they predate Codex Vaticanus and Codex Sinaiticus. And there is one papyri, P45, that has the word fasting in it, prayer and fasting. So that comes from the 2nd century. And if it's papyri, it gets the nod. It's like, this is the earliest we have. Now, the only problem with P45 is that it's not as clear. The writing of fasting is not as clear as the writing of prayer is. The font, the legibility, it's not as clear. And so they make a notation at P45 and they go, vid, it means that it looks like it's the word fasting, but they're not positive. Okay. So you got to take all that evidence into account when you're trying to decide what's the correct text. And then on top of that, you have some pretty hefty uncials from the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th centuries that far and away have more, well, no, let's say it this way. As uncials in that first millennium, they have a lot of weight to them when you're deciding on what is the correct Greek text. And there are probably 7, 8, 9 of them that have the word fasting in it, in both those verses, Matthew and Mark. So it's prayer and fasting. Okay. So these are not medieval manuscripts like came, in the 2nd millennium when the monks were copying. These are like original uncial manuscripts that have the word fasting in the 1st millennium. So that has weight to it. And then you have these Greek manuscripts called minuscules that are written in small font, not large capital font. And there are numerous manuscripts of those, and they all have fasting in there. Okay. So, and then you look at some of the fathers, like Basil, he has the word fasting. The Diatessaron, which is a combination of different translations, that has the word fasting. So you look at all these and you say, look, I know what Codex Vaticanus and Sinaiticus say, but you have the weight plus the papyri evidence that has the word fasting in there. To my understanding, and I've been doing this for over 40 years, textual criticism is one of my favorite phases of theology, favorite branches of theology. I do know this: when you decide to take out the word fasting because Codex Vaticanus and Sinaiticus don't have it, you've made a judgment that you really have no right to make with all these other manuscripts that have the word fasting. And I know there's a majority of these Bibles, like the King James Bible. No, not the King James. No, it's not the American Standard Bible, the Jerusalem Bible, the New American Catholic Bible, the New American Standard Bible, the New English Bible, the New Jerusalem Bible, the NIV, that's a New International Version. Even the RSV has taken the word fasting out. And it's like, and most of these Bibles were translated at the same time. We're in the 70s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, all of them around the same time. And it's like a disease was going around. Okay, hey, well, this translation took out fasting. Why don't we take it out too? That seemed to be what the consensus was, how it was formed. The good old King James Bible had kept it in there in both verses. Of course, that comes from 1611. Okay, and the Douay Rheims kept it in there, and that's 1609, 2 years before the King James Bible. You have Reverend Knox, the Knox Bible, who has the word fasting in there. But the New American Catholic Bible, both editions, the 2011 and the 1971, don't have it in there. Okay, but most of those guys are liberal. Okay, and there used to be a consensus about Codex Vaticanus and Sinaiticus that, well, these were the top Greek manuscripts and they're untouchable. If they both agree, then it doesn't matter what the other manuscripts say. We're going to go with Vaticanus and Sinaiticus. That used to be the consensus in the last half of the 20th century. And then that started to change. You know why? Well, because we had some guys do some dissertations on Codex Vaticanus and Sinaiticus, and they found that they disagree with themselves a lot of the time. So how reliable can they be? Okay. Once we know that Vaticanus and Sinaiticus don't agree to the proper proportions that we would expect these pristine manuscripts to agree, well, then that changes the whole field of textual criticism. Okay. And that's what we found in the latter part of the 20th century with these two special manuscripts. Okay. But the damage had already been done. They had already taken out the word fasting in most of these translations, modern translations, from the RSV to the NAB in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. Okay. The damage had already been done because everybody thought Vaticanus and Sinaiticus were it. That was the top of the Greek manuscripts. And now we know they're not. Okay. So, and then the other thing was Codex Alexandrinus from the 5th century has the word fasting in it. And this was found at the same time Codex Vaticanus and Sinaiticus were found in the 1800s. So now you got another piece of evidence. So I agree. They should have never taken out the word fasting. Okay. Anybody who claims that the text, the Greek text, lean toward that doesn't know what he's talking about. I can tell you that for sure. And so that leaves it as a what you would call a philosophical decision that they were going to take the word fasting out because, we just don't do that anymore. Okay. But let me tell you something. Nothing's changed about fasting. Fasting, you want a quick way to get to God's heart? Go fast. Look, it's easy to say prayers. It's easy to talk. You try fasting for a while. Try that for a couple days. 2-3 days. See how you feel. Okay? That's where the rubber meets the road. Now, I'm not saying anything disparaging about prayer. I'm just saying of the two, if you want to get to God's heart, what is God like? He likes sacrifice. And fasting is sacrifice. And only you and God know about it. Because if you go tell anybody else, you're not going to get the reward you wanted, as Jesus told us. Okay? But you want to go to God real fast? Start fasting. And don't let anybody ever tell you that fasting is just some ancient, pagan idea, or that it's just old Catholicism or this or that. No. Okay. Apart from the whole Greek issue, fasting in itself is one of the most powerful ways to get to the heart of God if you want something done. Okay. And we all know that, don't we? Yeah. Because have you ever tried to fast before? I tried it and I reached 4 days, and that was all I could take. But they say after the 4th day it starts going downhill and it gets easier. Well, maybe so, but I never reached it. Okay. Um, so we all know how hard it is to fast, right? Yeah. Well, that's why Jesus says that's one of the highest forms of sacrifice you can give to God. So, yeah, there was an agenda behind these modern translations to get rid of fasting, because the Greek evidence, although possibly a percentage was on their side, it wasn't near enough for somebody to excise that phrase from the New Testament. Nowhere near it. Okay. When you take something out of the New Testament and says, well, it doesn't belong there, you better have 95% of the Greek manuscripts on your side, or you have no right to take it out. Of course, we had a whole liberal theology behind all this that caused part of that problem, but at any rate. Okay, I need to move on here. Sorry, guys, I'm taking so long with these email questions. I'll get to your questions on the board in a minute. We had a discussion a few weeks ago about whether the Orthodox have the same canon as the Catholics do. I found out that they do. Okay, and so there's no problem there between the Catholics and the Orthodox in the first 7 councils, because that's when the canon was formed. Now, the only difference is our canon was infallibly determined in 1543 at the Council of Trent. Okay, but all Trent did basically was rubber stamp everything the historical councils had said about the councils and just made it infallibly. Okay, but all the previous councils, even the Orthodox councils, the 7 councils that they at least believe in, all of them had the same canon, and that's the canon that the Orthodox have today. Someone asked about the Hughes Drever experiment, and I looked this up, and I did see this before. I just didn't remember it, but basically, that is just another Michelson-Morley type experiment. Okay, and then I read the back of the explanation, and it says this, which gave it away for me. It says, if inertia has a directional dependence, a triplet or broadened resonance line should be observed. During the 24-hour course of Drever's version of the experiment, the Earth turned, and the magnetic field axis swept different sections of the sky. Drever paid particular attention to the behavior of the spectral line as the magnetic field crossed the center of the galaxy. So what does that tell you? Look, these guys are basing their experimental results on the fact that the Earth moves. Okay? You can't do that. You can't assume the Earth moves and then determine what the results of your experiment are. That's what Einstein did. You see, he assumed that the Earth was moving, and then that allowed him to develop his special relativity theory. And they talk about the same thing in this paper, Hughes Drever paper, about trying to preserve Lorentz invariance. Now, what's a Lorentz invariance? Well, if you remember, they're trying to explain how they're going to explain why this interferometer didn't show any positive results for a moving Earth. So what they did was they said, well, there's this thing that happens called the Lorentz contraction, where whenever you move something, it contracts. And so the experimental apparatus is going to contract, and it's going to give a false positive for an Earth that's not moving. And that's the way they did all these experiments. And Hughes Drever is no exception. Once you assume the Earth is moving and then you base your experimental results on the fact that you think the Earth is moving, well, of course they're going to show Lorentz invariance and special relativity. because that's how they were formed in the first place. So this experiment means nothing to us. Somebody wrote in and wanted to know about the Milankovitch cycles. The Milankovitch, how do we explain the Milankovitch cycles in relation to geocentrism? Okay, now, if you know what they are, there's 3 different precessions that the heliocentrists say that the Earth has. One is where the axis, the Earth is supposed to turn on its axis, but the axis itself moves a little bit every year. Okay, and it's going to make a circle. And someday it's not going to point to Polaris, it's going to point to Vega. And that takes 26,000 years. So that's one of the cycles, okay? Now, how would you explain that in the geocentric universe? Well, it's not hard, okay? Instead of the Earth moving its axis, the universe is moving its axis. And it's going to take 26,000 years for it to complete that particular precession. Okay, and the same with the other 2 precessions that are in the Milankovitch cycles. It's the universe that's making those twists and turns that we call precessions, and there's 3 distinct ones. Okay, so just know this: whatever the heliocentrist says for his model can be replicated in the geocentric model, because all we do is switch from the Earth being the mechanism to the universe being the mechanism. And whatever angle the Earth can be at is the same angle that the universe can be at. Okay? And I think we win the game on this issue because we can show the forces that are moving the universe. You can show why the Earth in the heliocentric version is moving, but it's not force related. In the geocentric frame, we have a rotating universe that has angular momentum, and it's off kilter a little bit because the center of mass is at the Earth, not the sun, and so that's going to cause these precessions. So we have a direct source for why the universe would make these 3 precessions. Whereas the heliocentric version, yeah, we could vision them happening, but where are the forces that are making this occur? That's what we would want to know. So there's the difference there. Okay, so much for that. Let me get a drink of water. I think I'm doing okay tonight. I thought I was going to get real tired real fast, but I took 3 naps today to prepare for this so that I wouldn't get tired. It seems to be doing the trick. So now watch me just fall and collapse here in the next 5 minutes. Who knows? All right, let me go up to the top here and find out what everybody's thinking tonight. So, Young Earth says, hope you're feeling better, Dr. Bob. God bless you and keep you. Thank you, sir. I am feeling better. COVID, fake news. That comes from my good friend Lawrence. So glad to see you back. Nice to be back. Smells like pandemic. Come on, Lawrence. Okay, thank you for all the good wishes, people. I'm going to get right to the question here. Glenn says, why do you think God banished Satan and his fallen angels to the earth, knowing he would create man there? Wasn't he putting man at risk by placing man in the same place he banished Satan? Well, your question is a little bit anachronistic there, Glenn, because the time that Satan and his demons decided to disobey God was when they decided to tempt Adam and Eve, not before. You know, there's this whole theory out there that there was this big battle amongst the angels prior to the creation of the world, and all this. That's all speculation. Okay, all speculation. The only firm evidence we have for the turn of Satan away from God is when he saw Adam and didn't want to serve Adam and tried to figure out a way to make Adam fall so that Satan would be the victor and he would become the ruler of this world. And God would have to allow it because the rules were already put in place that would be the case. That's when he fell. And when did that happen? Well, God already put him in the Garden of Eden, didn't he? Yeah, he put him in there to test this creature, Adam, to see if he was going to be faithful. Okay, so God had no qualms about putting Satan in the same environment as Adam. He wanted that to happen. Okay, because he had to test this creature. And so that's the way you want to look at it. Okay, now God won't banish Satan until the end of time, the second coming. Okay, and that's because those are the rules that even God has to follow. Now you'll find in Apocalypse chapter 12, you'll have the Jesus being born in the first 6 verses, and then what do you have? Well, then you have Michael and the devil fighting a battle, and Michael wins, and the devil is banished to earth at that time. Well, when was that time? Well, that was at the cross when Jesus went to the cross. There's this big battle. See, Satan had access to heaven prior to the cross. And once Jesus goes to the cross and finishes the Father's will, Michael has a battle with the devil and kicks him out of heaven. And where's he going to go now? Well, now he's going to go down to the earth where the woman is. The very woman that gave birth to Jesus in the first 6 verses. Now in the last part of Apocalypse 12, she's on earth, and that's where the devil is cast. And he casts out a flood to swallow her up, and the earth comes and swallows up the flood. That's all symbolic language, and it's all explained in my commentary on the Apocalypse. But that's where we are right now. The devil's chasing the woman, and the woman flees into the wilderness for 1,260 days, which is all symbolic. It's a symbolic number of the whole New Testament period, from the first coming of Christ to the second coming. So we're going to be chased by the devil, yes, until Jesus comes back. And that's because he's been consigned to the earth now and has no more access to heaven. Okay? All right. Why did many characters in the Old Testament take many wives and God honored it? And yet God made one Eve and intended us to be with one wife. God bless you, Dr. Sungenis. Thank you. Okay, so the law in Deuteronomy 18 was that men should not multiply wives. Actually, it says kings should not multiply wives. And yet we find David with 8 wives. We find Solomon with 300 wives, 700 concubines. Boy, that guy had some energy, didn't he? Yeah, but you got to remember, this is all in a time when you conquer a foreign king and you take his females for wives as an exchange, and this brings you closer, and because now you're sharing people. So most of what Solomon went through there was all by political design, with all the foreign kings, because they had basically conquered all of the Middle East from the Nile to the Euphrates. Okay, that was their land, and that's pretty big. And so everybody was under his thumb. They used to give him 666 talents total of gold per year from all these countries. And in order to show goodwill, he would marry their females of his choice, of course, but it was basically all political. Okay. David's was not so much political as it was, you know, he, he wanted 8 wives. And they used to fight against each other, as a matter of fact. So it got very personal. Um, those two basically were the only two. And this was you have to understand, this was at the height of Israel's total existence. There was nothing higher than the time of David and Solomon. This was it. This was the pinnacle of the Israeli nation. And after that, everything went downhill. But this was it. Okay. And so you would expect things like this to happen, where God's laws would be sort of, winked at. And because we're so powerful, we'll overstep our bounds a little bit here. And, we don't expect God to come down with thunderbolts and, kill us for it. So they took things, they took advantage of God's kindness, so to speak, and the fact that they were all powerful and could basically do anything they wanted. Who was going to stop them? Okay, uh, so that was at that time. Prior to that and after that, we don't find a whole case for multiplying wives in the Old Testament. We just don't find it. We find a lot of divorce, okay, and that's why they were given a divorce law where they were permitted to divorce for anything they wanted, basically, um, which was not the case prior, because it was only for fornication. But now with the Mosaic law in Deuteronomy 24, they basically could divorce for anything they wanted. And God allowed them to have it because, look, these people were stubborn-hearted from the get-go. I mean, when they were in Egypt, God complains about them being stubborn-hearted. When they came through the 10 plagues that were cast upon the Egyptians, God complains about them being stubborn-hearted. The first thing they do when they escape the Egyptians is what? They make a golden calf and worship it while Moses is up in the mountain for 40 days. So from the time they started to the time they got to the land of Canaan, where they had 600,000 men come out of Egypt, probably 600,000 women as their wives, and maybe another 600,000 kids, if they had one kid per family. So you almost had 2 million people. How many of them made it to the land of Canaan? Hardly any of them. Joshua, Caleb, and the people that were under 20 years old. Let's say there's 100,000 of them. Okay. They all died in the wilderness because of their sins. So they were hard-hearted from day one to the time that they were taken off into Babylonian captivity. These people were sinning, left and right. And so that's why God allowed them to divorce, because of the hardness of their heart. And that destroys a society. Divorce will destroy a society, okay? Because it's the ramifications of divorce. It's who's involved, who's affected, and the kids are affected, okay? And then you have mixed families and all this, and that's just a mess. It hardly ever works. So you find divorce much more than you find polygamy. You find polygamy just among a selected few people, and that's it. Okay, so that wasn't a major problem in Israel. Divorce was the problem in Israel. All right. Question: thoughts on Scott Hahn, Biblical Exegesis, and the St. Ignatius Study Bible he helped create? It's a good starter Bible commentary. I know the guy who put it together, Curtis Mitch. As a matter of fact, I was originally going to help Scott on this, and then I was not able to, and he took over that study. Curtis Mitch did, and I think he is well equipped to do what he did, and he did a good job. Now, but it's not going to go very deep into, they don't know the languages, the Greek or the Hebrew, so they're not going to go in that direction. Okay. Basically, a lot of Scott Hahn's approach to biblical interpretation is typology. Okay. That has a certain ring to it for a lot of people because they like to see all the tie-ins between the Old and New Testament and all that, and that's okay. Okay. But it's not going to penetrate really deep into the text, the context, the Greek and Hebrew etymologies, all those kinds of things. You're just not going to get that in the Ignatius Study Bible. So that's why I say it's a good starting Bible commentary for people who are just getting into the Bible. And that's, we need stuff like that. So in that sense, he has my blessing, and I hope it does well. I have a few of them on my shelf as well. Okay. Question: have you had a chance to think about the Father Pavone defrocking? It's just a sign of the times, I think. I'm not surprised to see it, because these bishops in the United States especially are so liberal minded, and they are so far away from true Catholicism that anybody who steps on their toes, like Father Pavone has done over the years, they just want to get rid of this guy. Okay. And they don't have any shame about it whatsoever, because look, they're all so brainwashed away from the truth. I wonder if many of these bishops really have the true Catholic faith. I really do. I just see instance after instance, not only on the theological level, but on the moral level. I don't know if you've watched Mike Varus's show, Church Militant. I almost get sick of watching it after a while, because it's just story after story, bishop after bishop, doing the same shenanigans over and over again. And nobody does anything about it. And the only reason we know about it is because of people like Mike Varus, who tell us. Otherwise, it's all kept hush hush. So, yeah, with Father Pavone, he was bound to reach this point where he ticked off his bishop so much that the bishop said, I'm never going to be able to stop him, so I'll defrock him. I feel sorry for Father Pavone, but this is what happens when you stick your neck out for the gospel in today's world. You're going to get your head chopped off. Okay? Well, look, don't worry. Jesus knows all about it. He predicted it. Okay? That's what he did when he was going to the cross. He, gives the parable of the vineyard, where God sends the first emissary, the second emissary, the third emissary, and they kill them. Because, well, maybe if I send my son, they'll respect him. And they kill him too. Okay? So God knows this is all happening, and he's putting it all in his little black book. Okay? And at the end, it's all going to be read, and, he's going to convict those that should have been convicted on earth but weren't. So in the end, look, it's all going to turn out where everything's good. Okay? So you got nothing to worry about. And Father Pavone shouldn't be surprised. This is par for the course. Look, if I'm doing the right thing, I'm going to step on some toes, and they're not going to like it. And they're in authority, and they're going to try to get rid of me. Okay? And when you're talking about abortion, that's not like a gray issue. Okay? Yeah, you're murdering somebody. That's a black and white issue. So he doesn't have to worry about whether it's, dealing with some philosophical issue. This is a black and white moral issue. So he knows he's in the right for what he's doing. And most of these bishops allow abortion. You know, they allow homosexuality. They don't do anything about the pedophilia. So, you know, they're doing exactly what the Sanhedrin did and the Pharisees and the Sadducees during Jesus' time. Okay? They make up their own rules. They've already left the faith. Okay? So that's the kind of Catholicism we have today. You got to be prepared for it. If you're not, you're going to be, yeah, you can be harmed if you're not prepared for it. So prepare yourself. Okay. Will you be able to purchase a stream or digital download of the film? I think we will be. I think we will be doing that. I don't know how soon, though. That's the thing. We have to discuss that, and whatever we decide, you'll know because we'll advertise it on our website. And I'm starting to get tired. I may be able to go only a few more minutes here. So let me see, because my voice is starting to go. Let me see how far I can go here. Question, does Titus 3:5 refute Protestant justification where sanctification and regeneration can exist in the same category of salvation? Your biblical commentary is extraordinary. Well, thank you so much. Titus 3:5 is one of those interesting verses. Sometimes it's used against us Catholics, as a matter of fact. So let me turn there and read it for us. All right, here we go. He saved us not because of righteous things we had done, but because of his mercy. He saved us through the washing of rebirth and renewal of the Holy Spirit, whom he poured out on us generously through Jesus Christ our Savior, so that having been justified by his grace, we might become heirs, having the hope of eternal life. Okay, so the most important words here are, but when the kindness and love of God our Savior appeared, he saved us not because of righteous things we had done, but because of his mercy. Okay, so a lot of Protestants like to use this against Catholics because it says righteous things we have done. Okay, that's what the word is here, righteous things we had done. See, but what we tell them is this: if there's any church who would back up what Titus says here, it's the Catholic Church. Because what is the first thing that the Council of Trent says in justification when it made its canons? The first canon of the Council of Trent on justification says exactly what Titus 3:5 says. As a matter of fact, the Council of Trent's Canon 1 even goes beyond. It says, anything you have done, any law you have done or any other thing you have done cannot merit justification. Okay, now that's pretty much what Titus says here. No righteous things you have done are going to merit you justification. Okay, let me read it again. He saved us not because of righteous things we had done, but because of his mercy. He saved us through the washing of rebirth. So baptism is the gift of God that takes away the original sin that we inherited from Adam. Now, obviously, that's not because of any righteous things we had done. God just had mercy on us, and because of the nature of the sin, wherein Adam and Eve were deceived by the devil, God gave them a reprieve. Okay? Even as heinous as that sin was, because Adam and Eve basically had called God the devil and made the devil into a god. And you can't get much worse than that. I mean, that is just utter blasphemy. But even then, because they were deceived into thinking that and didn't do it deliberately, God had mercy on them. Okay? So it wasn't for any righteous thing they did. It is because God said, okay, they're not like the angels, where the angels sinned and they knew exactly what they were doing, and they did it deliberately. Therefore, there is no chance of salvation for them. Okay. For Adam and Eve, it was different, but that still took an act of grace for God to say, okay, I will give them a chance. I will give them a chance. And that's what he does for us in baptism. He gives us another chance. It doesn't mean we're off the hook. You know, what it means is that now we are back where Adam was, where he is confronted with, here's what you do that I want you to do, and if you don't do it, you have sinned. And that's where we are today. We're like back in the Garden of Eden, only this time we have the problem of concupiscence from original sin that gives us a tendency towards sin. You ever wonder where all those bad thoughts come from, and why sometimes it's so easy to sin and so hard to be good? Well, that's because you have concupiscence in you. That's the punishment that we got from when Adam and Eve sinned. And every person has it. So it's going to be tough to obey those laws, harder than it was for Adam and Eve. But that's where we are now. And the reason we can get to that position is because God had mercy on us, not because we did something good. Okay? All because of God's mercy. God says, all right, I'm going to have mercy on you. You can have another chance. Here it is. And if you flub up this time, then it's eternal damnation. Okay? Take it or leave it. So that's what Titus is teaching. That's what the Council of Trent teaches. It's all because of God's mercy. Now, once we get into that another stage where now we have a chance to show God we love him and we want to be obedient to him and we want to live in heaven with him, well, that's where now your righteous deeds are going to count toward your meriting of justification. Once you're out of the condemnation stage and you're into the grace stage, well, now things are a little different. You see, that's not what Titus is talking about. Titus is talking about receiving baptism, which takes you out of the original sin and the condemnation of Adam and the whole human race and puts you in a different phase now. Now you're in the grace phase, the grace stage. And now you can act with your works and you can work real hard. Okay, do good works, spiritual works of mercy, corporal works of mercy, feeding the poor, clothing the naked, all those kinds of things you can do. And they increase your justified state before God. But that's because you're already in the grace state, you see. That's because God initially decided to give you mercy to put you in that state with baptism. And then once you're in that state, then you can take advantage of it and do your good works. And that's the proper distinction that needs to be made. Okay? So don't let any other Protestants use that verse against you. Okay. I am going to have to end because I am tired and I don't feel so well. Hopefully, I ask for your prayers because this COVID thing has just knocked me for a loop and humbled me also. But yeah, I just don't have the energy to keep going, and I'm losing my voice. And that's probably because I haven't done this for 5 weeks. So, but at any rate, I hope I have given you what you're looking for tonight, and I hope to do so next week. And next week, I hope to be better. So I'll have to say goodnight. And sorry, I can't get all your questions. So remember the movie, our introduction, 18-minute introduction, I think it's 20 minutes now, is going to be available on the 26th of December. And take a look at that. And you can make a pre-purchase of day one before it comes out in 2023. Okay, so God be with you all. Thank you for coming. And we'll be here again next Wednesday, which would be the 28th. And that will still be 8 to 10, 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then in January, the first Wednesday in January, we're going to switch to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to 5 p.m. Okay? And that should give me more energy to keep doing this program, because that's like in the workday. So, okay, I hope everybody can understand that, and that's the best I can do to accommodate all of you. Okay, so God be with you all, and see you again next week. And words of wisdom to you: fear God and do not sin. God be with you.